All right, let's start blocking out our lighting for this asset. And the first thing I'm going to do is remove this V-Ray light dome I had set up earlier. This was just for testing purposes, so we're not going to need it right now. Let's delete that. And our first section we're going to work on is going to be the top. So let's switch over to our perspective cam render top. And I'm going to drag over our reference. So the first thing is to try and block out the lighting for this top part. And I think we're going to start with this upper left hand area. This seems to be like our main hero one. And then we'll start attacking all these other little bits that are happening. And you know, what we'll do is we'll drop it in and see what is affecting, what areas we're going to need to remove or work on later. So let's move this to the side and let's start out by creating our first render layer. I'm just going to call this barista body, and just to break it apart, we'll just call this one top, and then I'd just like to have beauty just so I know that this is a beauty path, not mats or anything else. Okay, so let's bring in our stuff, and I'm just going to grab the whole group, just bring it all, add selected. Now that we have everything here, we're not going to be working on the cups, but at the moment the cups V-Ray objects properties is set to not rendering. So right now if we render it, all this should be not visible, but also I kind of don't really like doing this because we still have geometry in this render layer, and if we're not even going to use it, then I don't see the point of it being here. It might actually be distracting. So one thing I like to point out is that when you do what I did earlier was bring in this asset into this render layer, if you grab just the group, it's going to have the group, and so no matter what you do, if you select the cup and just go right click remove, it's not going to do it because it's looking at the group. So if you run into this issue in the future, if you want to just fix that, it's best to just remove the group. Let's go back into our master layer and just select the geo you actually want. So we could do something like this. Oh, let me get rid of it. Unselect. Oh, it is not letting me. It does not like that. Now this is a little tricky because you might end up missing some geo. So that looks like we got everything. And we're not going to need these coffee beans for now. And I'm just going to jump back in here and add selected. There you go. I'm just going to jump back and forth. Cool. Alrighty. So now that we have this set up, let's drop in our first light, and then we're going to be using our V-Ray light rectangles here. And of course, let's just rename it, and this we're going to call this for now. These names might change as I go on. I'm pretty sure I will probably end up changing these, but I just need something so I make sure at least I have an idea of what each light is doing. Okay, so I'm just going to scale it up, and of course let's make sure we have our reference. Let me pull it up. Looks like I lost it. Here you go. So we're going to focus on trying to get these highlights here. This let's just see what happens. We're trying to see if we can get it as tight as we can with this nice, interesting fall off. And let's see how it affects the rest of the asset. So I'm also going to set this more or less here just as a start. And let's get our... Oop, well, you caught me. So I did this test earlier. Let's actually remove it so you guys can see as it's being developed. We're doing top. So I'm just going to do a IPR so we can move around and see what's happening. All right. So the reason why this is coming out like it's missing, it's actually the light is blocking. So in order to fix that, you would just go into your light and just make sure this is set to invisible, and now that should appear. So yeah, let's start moving around. I'm just gonna put this here, just scale it out so we can So now what we want is some sort of fall off from here. And as you can see, we're starting to get some of these highlights on here. But obviously this thing is all blowing out and we need a very nice soft fall off coming from the left to the right. First thing I would do is start bringing in some texture. So I'm going to bring in a ramp. So under my light properties here, I'm going to go use texture. And in here, I'm just going to click the checkerboard and throw in a ramp. So now to actually see it in the viewport, you go back into your light properties and under here, show in viewport, just hit texture only. So right now it's going from the top to the bottom. Let's switch that to, instead of V, we'll switch it to U. So that's how we're getting this fall off going from the left to the right. And let's see what's happening here. So now first thing I see is that the highlight is there, but it's not necessarily in the right shape that we want. We want it actually quite opposite. We want it to be bigger on top and then fall off as it goes towards the bottom of this edge here. This more or less is looking like it's getting there. It's still kind of thick, and but also what I'm also noticing is that look how it's blowing out all these other stuff that we don't see in the reference, which is what I had a hunch earlier was that these might be treated separately. We're also getting these reflections on this grinder up here that we don't really see here. Again, this model might not be one-to-one, but it's interesting to see what's happening. Also, another thing I noticed that these decals are all getting blown out as well, and they might have to actually be treated separately as well, which in that case we can just throw the texture, because I think this is a texture right onto the geo. We can throw that as an extra texture render element and bring it in post. So we might need to remove it from here so it renders out nice and clean, and then we'll render out the decals as a separate render layer, and then in Nuke we'll just pop them back over, and we'll have complete control in grading it and make sure that it's not blowing out, and but for now let's focus on this light and let's focus on this body, and then we'll start adjusting as we go. Okay, so we got the fall off. It's kind of bright here. The shape is wrong, so let's keep playing around with it. Here, let's see if I can keep it here. It might go away. All right, that's fine. So let's start by rotating this a little bit. So as you can see, the shape is already forming to more or less what we want. Now, what I'm seeing also is that this bottom area is pretty blown out, but I'm also thinking that this highlight should probably go from brightest here and then have a nice fall off, or at least we can have some control of fall off here. So to do that, this is something we do quite a bit, is I'm going to use two ramps here. What I'm going to do is go into my node editor. Let me just make a new, load this guy up. And so here is our light. Here's our ramp. So I'm going to need another ramp going the opposite way. So this one's set to U. I need this one to be set to V. And we're going to use a multiply divide. And now what I'm going to do is set this to input 1. I can just do a drag. I'm going to just drag this ramp 1 here, drag this ramp 2 here, and now I'm going to connect that to the texture of the light. So now the reason I do that is now I have control from top to bottom. So if I can squeeze this up, you can see how it's being affected, and now we have this independent control on this light. So we got this nice fall off going from top to the bottom, and we're now not getting none of this blown out area. But now we're getting other issues here. We're losing this top edge, and I want it to be a little bit hot. And also we're actually clipping. We should probably move the light a little bit over so we can kind of fill this area out. Let's see. Let's rotate. wanted. We'll have to play around with this a little bit more. Looks like we're getting some clipping here, but also we're getting at least this fall off that we wanted. Still a bit bright. Might need some adjustments in comp. We can probably use some sort of normal direction to make sure that nothing under here gets too blown out, but at least we're getting the shape. And we're also getting these highlights. So, whoop. I'm trying to see if we can get these nice shapes that separate the buttons from the surface. And if we zoom in just a little bit, we're getting a little bit of it. Also, another indicator as we're seeing is that there's a really nice hot highlight going here, and then it has a slight fall off going towards the left. We're not getting none of that here, which we should probably see if we can get a nice hot highlight going down and then fading off. And I'm going to use this ramp going from left to right to see if we can do something about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this set to 1, and I'm going to see if I can make it fall off towards the edge. Just so you guys can see how it's how it's looking. And I might want it to be hotter, so I'm gonna actually just make another dot here and just bring this, squeeze it in so we can get a nice hot light coming down. It's interesting. This is bugging me. Let's see if we scale it up, if we can fill in some of that. Now, another thing to take note is when you scale an area light, it is affecting your lighting. So actually, if I keep scaling this, obviously the position is different, but it also will affect your values. But all right, let's see. We're getting somewhere. I have to mess around to get this shape a little bit more, or if it's curving too much, we might end up having to do another light just to this area just to fill this in if we can't get it with one light. Yeah, it looks like it's bending quite a bit, so we might have to like go this way. Yeah, this is interesting. We'll need to tackle that separately. All right, so that's the first part. Again, we're not getting any of this before, which makes me believe we might have to do this separately or break the light linking altogether. So yeah, it's a nice segue to let's start going to light linking. Now, two ways to handle this. We can keep these buttons here, and just when we render it separately, we'll just kind of replace them with the other render. We can also go into our V-Ray object properties. So if we go into buttons, we can actually completely turn them off. Let's see if it updates. Oop. Oh, interesting. Oh yes, they are turned off, and now that's just the back sections that are showing the lights and stuff. So that might be a way we can just basically remove them altogether. But I kind of like having them there sometimes because we do get some of that bounce. With having there, it throws some of that bounce around this fall off of edge. So, you know, for now, we'll keep them there. If they come too distracting, or if we're getting some weird edging, then we might have to turn them off altogether. Also, these, we're going to have to go into the shader and remove these decals as well. Okay, let's move on to another section. Let's start doing some of this edge work around here. So let's start with this light back here. Let's make a new one, and we'll work our way around. Let's do a refresh IPR. In the meantime, let's make this other light. Again, if this ever gets distracting, then you can just go to textures only here on the show and viewport and just hit disable just to kind of hide it so we can look around. I'll make a new light. Scale this up. Now, if I look at the reference, I'm seeing it sort of also is getting some of this, it goes from small and it just gets bigger towards the bottom, and we also seem to have a fall off. So we're going to use a ramp again. Let me make sure I can see it. Oh. Okay. There you go. That should be a good place to start. Actually, I'm going to push this a little bit further, halfway. And let's do a quick IPR and let's just focus on this area. All right, so obviously way too hot. Let's push this back a little bit. And again, it's showing because it's not set to invisible, so let's make sure we have that. All right. Now, another thing as I'm looking at this reference too, another thing to keep in mind is actually this reference is set to white. And we should be testing this with a white background to make sure our values are looking correct. So let's actually set that up. I'm going to pause this real quick and I'm going to set up a white background. All right, so what I like to do is to set up a white background is I'm just going to pop this open, and this is the show corrections control tab here, and this opens this guy up, and I'm just going to go all the way down here towards background image. And now what I do is I just have like a 512 by 512 white image from Photoshop I just created, and I load it in here. So if I just go into my source images, I think I threw it in there, just a white background. The reason why I like it here is because I can just quickly turn it on and off, and it respects the alpha. As you can see, it's cutting through it. So this is good to see, so we can make sure that our edges are looking good. As you can see, look how blown out this button is, and we're losing it completely once we bring it over on a white background. Also, just visually, it's good. It gives you like a nice check to make sure we're all looking good. Okay, so let's go back to adjusting this light. I'm gonna set this IPR again. I'm gonna put this away. Now its intensity set to 30, which is could be a big issue. Just gonna set this back to 1. All right. So now now this thing is blowing out completely, which again might have to be light linked and removed, and will have its own light on its own. But right now what I'm concerned is getting this shape. So let's work on that. Maybe whoa. This fall off might be a bit strong, so let's remove it for now. I just want to work on the shape. Squeeze it over. looks like we're getting somewhere. We're getting some of this fall off on the top. And we could tighten this up a little bit more, but what I like what's happening here is it's causing the shape that we're getting down here. Let me just zoom in. So we're getting some of this, which is what we want. Not too happy with what's happening down here, but we're getting somewhere. And also we're getting some of this spillage on this edge, which is great because we get a little bit of differentiation between these two pieces, which is great. This isn't half bad. Okay, let's start adjusting the values now. And I'm going to set our background image again. I'm going to turn on the ramp, and now we got some of this fall off. Yep. I'd like this to be a little bit more solid. It's not the worst. Okay. I'm gonna switch this from linear to smooth. Maybe if we get some more of a softer fall off here. And now what I believe this edge here, it might be coming from this bottom part, so we're gonna have to do our trick again. Let's open up our node editor and just, where are we? Okay, here we go. And do a ramp. Multiply, divide. And let's bring it in here to our rect texture. There you go. See, now we have that control for this edge here. So might be a bit too much. So let's open up. So that gives it a little bit more of a solid. And again, now we're losing too much on this. I would like to see it creep up a little bit more. Let's bring this down maybe 15. Also, we're gonna throw all these into light select, so if we need even further value adjustments, we can also do it in comp. Okay, we're getting somewhere. We got the sort of the shape, we got this sort of shape. You know, again, the shader is also very interesting because we're also getting this very different kind of red. Now we could go in there and adjust it on our own if you're using this model to follow along. Yeah, we go into the shader and we're gonna have to change the colors a bit, and also, like I said, we still need to go in and remove these decals. We're gonna render them separately. Okay, you know what I'm gonna do is, you know, because we are in IPR, things are a little bit shaky. Let's do one nice quality render so we can see where we at. All right, so this is one of the renders I just did. Okay, we got something here. We got a little bit of fall off. Again, we're blowing out, so we need to adjust that. And yeah, for two lights, here we are. So let's keep going, and let's at least block out at least the big major ones, and then we'll start dissecting other areas. Okay, let's start moving on to this side. Now what's interesting here is we're getting these highlight here, which I'm assuming it might be coming from this light. So we could see if we can adjust it a little bit so we can catch some of this highlight. If not, this might be treated by itself. But let's get this hot highlight that's going from very hot to dark on this right side. All right, let's turn on the IPR again and we'll just focus on this side. All right, here we go. So let's see what we got. Same thing, we need to make sure it's nice and thin on the top and it just kind of gets bigger at the bottom. So let's see if we can do more or less the same treatment as the other side. I'm going to rotate this and I'm going to make it quite long here so it reaches around here. There you go. Yeah. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now the only thing I'm worried about is making sure that we're getting this dark edge. So it goes from this tone to dark to a hot highlight. Let's start out by throwing in a ramp. Let's make sure we can see it. All right. Let's switch this up. Let's slowly reveal it. Again, not the worst. It's getting somewhere. And I'm also noticing, if I zoom in, what I'm also noticing is that it gets slightly less dark as it goes towards the bottom. This seems to be like even, so we might need another ramp. Let's do that. Let's set that up right away. Oof. Yep, and I think we're missing some of this up here, so I think I need to scale this up a little bit more so we can reach this highlight can just kind of leak a little bit above it. No, I'm gonna rotate it. Maybe this is. So a lot of it is just kind of playing around and just understanding the way the geometry behaves with these lights. Here you go, doing something around here, but now we're getting other issues. So a lot of the time is kind of just the first round of things is sort of playing with it, seeing how this light works with the geometry and what areas are going to need to be adjusted separately. It's pretty common, just kind of playing around with it. This is my first time going on this side. So let's see if we need to scale it up. So we see what we lost the bottom part here, which I know we get it if we extend this light and rotate it a bit. But so we need to figure out what's priority here, if we should kind of keep this light focused underneath and then have another one just to kind of leak this through, or see if we can get it all in one. Now obviously you want to see if you can get everything all in one. That's always better, so you don't have so many lights. But yeah, play around with it. You should always see if you can get it as much as you can in one light. We see now we're introducing this other highlight, which according to our reference, it doesn't look like we need any of that. So to be safe, I'll keep this as a separate treatment above here, and let's see if we can undo a little bit and get back to where we were. I felt we were a little bit closer when, at least to this shape before. I mean, we're still getting some of that light. I think it's inevitable because we need this light to leak down here, and by default it's just gonna kind of swoop in. Remember, we're treating these parts separately. These areas here, this is going to be an issue. We might have to do either a light blocker to make sure that the light doesn't go in through here, or we'll have to adjust it in comp. Again, when it comes to light selects, that's what they're meant for. Like this light becomes its own matte, so to speak, in Nuke, and we can just go in here and just remove it and then just comp it back in if we need to. Let's get this shape, and then I'm gonna do another one for this top part just to kind of leak it through. And yeah, I think we'll have our first pass on at least this top body.